I love card games, which, considering the fact I'm known for modded Minecraft and playing games that only require one brain cell, you might not have known that. Card games have always fascinated me, and why wouldn't it? It's a genre of games that's as simple as card do thing, play card on turn, win. But it's the unique crafting of your deck and the wacky bullshit you can do that makes them so much fun. I mean, I had this Magic Commander deck that I played on a totally legitimate and legal platform that used Igra, Eater of All, which, to simplify what Igra does, turns every creature into a cookie, of which said cookies would buff Igra in a way that'd make you question what was in the cookies in the first place. It was really fun. After playing that deck, I really wanted to get into Magic and began to do some research, only to realize how damn expensive this hobby was. It's probably not a surprise to anyone, but to me, I didn't really realize how much of a financial setback one card could be until I checked the card prices. Yes, card prices. This isn't a fucking collection. One card can cost anywhere from reasonable to a house mortgage. Now, to be entirely fair, it's not like I'm new to the concept of an expensive hobby. Games Workshop has me by the gene seeds, and these prices make me wish I didn't have them. 170 bucks for plastic? What the shit? I just want to play Orcs, GW! But, you know the saying, one expensive hobby at a time. That's what I would have said if indie games didn't exist. Monster Train was in my line of sight for a while, but I never exactly pulled the trigger, mostly because at the time I just recently gotten Slay the Spire and wasn't really looking to fry my unga bungoid brain on 3 card games at the same time. I also play Hearthstone. That's the second one. However, in the questionable year of 2025, I was craving a new card game experience, and with Slay the Spire 2 being in development until next year, a moment of cosmic timing happened and Monster Train 2 dropped in my time of need. And let me just say, why in the fuck did I not pick up this game sooner? This game kicks ass! Monster Train 2 is, and tell me if you heard this before, a deck-building roguelike game. However, unlike deck-building roguelike games, this one isn't trying to be Slay the Spire and has a very unique spin that I fell in love with within the first minutes. In this game, you play as a collective of 5 clans, asterisk, of both angels and demons who are trying to fight their way back into heaven, which has been taken over by the Titans. Admittedly, my lore knowledge is going to be slim. Not only did I not play the first game at all, but my attention span competes with a goldfish, so there won't be much lore. I am going to say spoilers though, just in case. There might be spoilers, and I have no idea. Anyways, enough pretending I know how to read. How does the game play? Stay tuned and find out. Also, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. Or don't. I mean, you do you. I'm not your mom. Let's just get this show on the railroad already. In Monster Train 2, your objective is to build an unstoppable deck to beat the final boss of the run. This process starts at the beginning of the game, where you choose your primary faction, which includes your champion, an allied faction, which grants you access to the cards from that faction but without its champion, and a Pyre Heart, which grants a unique passive that can change your approach to problems, with abilities such as giving you an extra 3 embers one time per battle, or allowing you to duplicate cards in your deck at any shop. You then start the game and travel up a railroad, where you'll pick paths to grant yourself a slew of different boosts, such as card upgrades, items, and special events that can change how certain cards or even how your run operates. For example, in a run I had playing as the Luna Cove, I had a card that would deal hefty damage, doubling it on a full moon. We'll talk more about all this later, so don't worry, but thanks to the collective of upgrades I added, it was free to cast and it would give me a copy of it so I could run that shit back. Each time playing this would boost my champion. It was beyond busted, and it was the first run I ever beat the game with. It was fun. However, despite how powerful all this might look, it's not easy breezy. Actually, it's far from easy. The combat in this game is pretty unique, challenging, and fun all at the same time. You have 3 rooms in your train, bottom, mid, and top. Don't laugh. Each having a capacity for what units are allowed based on their size, indicated with these little yellow frisbees, meaning you can only have so many units in a room until it can't fit anymore, so no just grabbing every creature you can. You gotta really strategize what monsters you're going to be running with in each room. Another aspect of the combat is how the enemies work. Enemies most of the time will spawn in the bottom room first, coming in as waves. This means the top 2 rooms don't have any threats and get more time to build up their buffs before they face anything. Once you end your turn, the monsters will then fight each other. If any enemies remain after that fight, they will then move up to the next room and a new wave will enter that bottom room. If the enemies reach your Pyre Heart, they do damage, too much damage, and you lose. Now, the Pyre Heart does defend itself, but it's generally recommended that you don't let enemies up there in the first place. So you have to plan all 3 rooms in a way that prevents anything from getting to the pyre. Now, even though my explanation sounds like I was defusing a bomb, it's admittedly both easy to learn while also being hard to master. Knowing what enemies do and how to handle each situation is a major part of your survival and will dictate whether you win or get your kneecaps shattered. I'm not quite done though, because every fight has a boss monster, whether a major one or just the last big bad of the fight. For the boss monsters at the end of basic fights, they have the perk known as Relentless. This perk makes it to where your monsters will fight till either your side is dead or their boss dies. If your side dies, they climb up up a room and the previous room is no longer usable, so your defenses are really put up to the test in this last wave. Big bosses, on the other hand, operate a little differently. Same wave system, but that big boss is there the entire fight, providing buffs, debuffs, and dealing damage to any lane it's stationed in. Also, instead of starting in the bottom room, it starts in another room that has your monsters that isn't the bottom room, if applicable. The monster also will keep moving to a different room every turn, so it is a constant threat to you at all times. Once waves run out though, the logic of a regular monster boss applies and you fight till you're dead up to the top room. This seems like a lot, but it's honestly pretty approachable and I found myself getting really sucked into it. It's actually probably some of the most engaging card game mechanics I've ever digested, and it's amazing how well this game lands its idea. I mean, day one I sunk in 7 hours. If it was hard to understand, my caveman ass wouldn't have played that long. But enough about mechanics, let's talk about the 5 starting factions that are currently in the game and the different card types.
Behold! The power of an angel!
The Banished are a clan of angels, and their main gimmick is all about moving around the train at will and granting Valor, a buff that not only grants increased damage, but grants armor based on Valor stacks. Your main champion, Fel, highly favors Valor, as she starts with multi-strike, and her upgrade paths help her or her allies in the same room gain Valor quickly. They're pretty straightforward with very few mechanical gimmicks, and that's because they're the literal faction you start the game with. I'm pretty sure if we were dropping a fucking Exodia deck on new players, you'd lose a lot of people. Speaking of starting factions,
Hello, I like money.
the Pybor are gold-hoarding dragons and whelps, and unlike the Banished, their playstyle has a lot more to discuss. Starting off, a lot of their abilities run off of gold and their secondary currency, the Dragon's Hoard. The Dragon's Hoard is a mechanic specific to Pybor where you accumulate stacks of it by casting spells, sacrificing monsters, or sometimes even through a passive from an item. The more you gain, the better your rewards are for looting it, ranging from cash, brand new passive items, even the shards that drop from big bosses. A lot of units in the Pybor also just have the ability to generate cash in general, so they're good for getting a lot of power out of shops. Then we have their clan-specific debuff, Pyrgel. Pyrgel is not a DOT, I cannot stress that enough. Do not make the same mistake I did in misunderstanding it. Do not be a brainlet like me, I'm illiterate. Pyrgel adds extra damage to any source. Attacks, spells, actual damage over time effects, all of it. Also, unlike other debuffs, it's the only debuff to my knowledge that doesn't decrease per turn and is persistent between rooms. So it's a fantastic way to buff all of your units in every room without having to directly buff them. The Pyborn's champion is Phoenix, but Phoenix? I'm just gonna go with Phoenix. And to be totally honest, the dude is far more straightforward than the clan. There's effectively 3 ways you can upgrade him. One grants him the ability to dish out more Pyrgel, another makes his active ability stack Dragon's Hoard, and the last one makes him permanently gain damage on kill. It's super funny how straightforward this guy is compared to the clan mechanics. The same cannot be said about
You take the moon and you take the sun.
the Lakovven is weird, but also really fucking strong. The Lakovven is a clan of fae, fairy, moon people. I'm gonna be honest, their species vexes me so. It's irrelevant though, because these bastards won me my first run. Put simply, this clan is very much a spell mage-like clan built around stacking conduit and playing cards based on the moon cycle. The moon cycle being their faction's unique mechanic where cards will have either a stronger or entirely different effect based on the moon cycle. Unless you get cards that control it, the cycle is more or less out of your control. At least that was my observation, so if it actually does have a cause, then we can chalk up my victory to blind caveman luck. Spells are your main source of power in this clan, since most of your monsters are so squishy they die in one blow. Eka is the champion of this clan, and she really plays into that whole mage business. Her upgrade paths either grant conduit from spells or moon cycles, or she can buff all your units every time the moon cycle changes. If you pick up spells that are attuned, which means they scale to mage power better, you'll steamroll through any boss. The only downside is early on they're incredibly weak and squishy, so you'll have to do a lot of playing around that detail. However, this next clan stands pretty starkly on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Mushroom dance, whatever could it mean?
I fucking love the Underle Legion, dude. This clan is my favorite on an aesthetic level. The Underle Legion are sentient fungi people who are focused on decay and making big, bulky units. They have a good handful of unique mechanics that aren't a passive effect like the other two, so listen up. First off, spawn is a keyword specific to this clan. When you play the card that has this effect, it spawns a fungi. Yes, they ran with the pun. I don't care if it's a dad joke. I love it. Shut up. Look at the little scrunkly fellas. Look how they stack up for power. I love them. Make plushies now, Shiny Shoe. This isn't a request, it's a demand. The fungi from the spawn mechanic also have their own mechanic called Troop. Troop makes it to where instead of the unit taking up another slot in the room, it instead stacks up on the already existing one, buffing its stats based on the new unit. This sounds simple enough, but there's so many ways to add troops to your fungi that if you build things right, you can end up with a 130 troop stacked fungi that would be impossible to hide in any size trench coat. This clan also has one of the very few DOTs called Decay, which deals chunks of damage per stack, decreasing by 1 every turn, and as you'd expect, the Underle Legion has tons of ways to stack Decay out the ass. I'm almost done with their keywords, I promise. The next one they have is called Propagate. Despite everything I've said, I'd argue that this is their main bread and butter that really puts them as a strong clan. Propagate increases every buff on the affected monster by the stack value. It also applies to debuffs, but if you're playing right, the debuffs seldom matter unless you're fighting the last boss in your run. And while this sounds simple enough, there's rooms that actually have the effect of Propagate, meaning that you have a constant flow state of a bunch of buffs being stacked up at once. And this works on troop as well, so Propagate actually spawns more troops on your troop creature. This clan's champion is Slay the Guillotine, which is such a badass name. Dude's a chunky, hard-hitting fungus with a cleaver, with upgrades that bolster the faction in sizable ways, from granting propagation to gaining permanent damage based on ally spawns, including revives and troop spawning, down to stacking up extra buffs to turn them into an unstoppable force. They are a slow-moving but hard-hitting wall. While not as offensive as the other clans we discussed, they got enough defense to make the Death Guard blush, and you know, maybe that's why I like them. They're very Nurglish in nature. Enough Warhammer talk. It's time for the last faction.
Science isn't about why, it's about why not.
Lazarus League has some similarity with Underle Legion, but they handle their shit just a little differently. The Lazarus League is chock full of monstrosities and scientific creatures, based all around giving stronger buffs and debuffs, but with overall less consistency. They only have 2 and kinda 3 keywords that are specific to them, those keywords being Mix, Unstable, and arguably Graft. Mix is where a lot of their power comes from, as you mix up concoctions to buff your monsters with almost any buff that isn't faction specific, or debuff enemies with the non-faction specific debuffs, as well as Unstable. The catch? It is completely fucking random. You have very little control over what concoctions you get, which makes them capable of both stupid scaling to shitting the bed at the worst possible moment. Really fun, but as the case with any card game, inconsistency is inherently challenging to play around. Unstable is their other keyword, a debuff that sets a limit to how low that monster's health can go. If the monster's health either hits or goes under that limit, the monster will do its best impression of a fork in a microwave, dealing damage equal to the stacks of Unstable on that monster to all monsters on that floor. This is a pretty potent effect in its own right, but the funniest part is that it's just as good at being applied to your own creatures as well. This is because of their arguable third keyword, Graft. Graft is a keyword that permanently attaches an equipment to a monster. Once that monster dies, it drops its equipment so you can give it to someone else. So given the fact I was just talking about how Unstable can be applied positively towards your own team, you are going to start seeing why here soon. All of the Graft minions are designed with insanely low health in this clan, meaning that they're usually 1 stack of Unstable away from detonating, dealing that damage to every monster instead of immediately melting upon contact. Then, once it curse explodes, you can just slap that equipment on a monster that actually deserves it. Now, I did say this was arguably the third keyword, because there are random events that show up that can graft onto monsters for any clan. However, it's worth noting that the Lazarus League is the only faction that has it consistently. The champion for the league is Orechi, a mad scientist who's all about either dishing out instability, mixing big concoctions, or weirdly enough, turning himself into an immortal time bomb. That last one unironically having the funniest synergy with Underle Legion I've ever seen. Didn't win with it though, which is something we're going to talk about later. All of these clans have alternative champions, and you unlock another 5 clans once you've progressed a fair bit into the game, but I'm going to spare you all the time because 1, the alternative champs only vary up your approach with each clan, but the overall mechanics remain the same, and 2, spoiler alert, you've been warned, the 5 additional clans are the ones from the previous game, so even though I haven't played the first game, I'm just going to assume that they're all the same. And 3, I'm an impatient dick, so with the clans knocked out, let's discuss directly what I find good and what I find bad, starting with the good. Monster Train 2 has a very solid understanding of its gameplay identity. There was never a point where I felt like a mechanic was detached from the experience or just shoehorned in. All the clans are designed meticulously around the room-to-room style, and all of them are distinct and memorable enough that I was able to make up a large chunk of this video just discussing them. While some clans definitely cooperate better with others, they are all capable of playing off each other well enough to do some real damage. Underle Legion and Lazarus League has to be my favorite combination because it felt like you were making a really big fungus monster with tons of wacky science experiments slapped into it. Got me acting like Frankenstein. Speaking of power, this game also achieves a rare feeling card games have a hard time landing, and that's the feeling of both being powerful yet capable of losing at any time. Never have I had a game make me feel like the king of the world only to boot my ass off the seat in one fell swoop like this game has. I've done so many runs, all of varying levels of strength, yet I always felt like a powerhouse. Despite this, I've only beaten the game 3 times. Again, we'll discuss this later because I know why that's the case and it's at least 50% skill issue. Also, the crossover events didn't feel too egregious for me and I actually kind of loved them as they seemed pretty rare. I only encountered like 2 over my 20 or so runs. Was kind of hoping I'd run into Balatro before this video came out, but oh well, I got at least Cult the Lamb. Also, the music in this game kicks ass. I wish I could share some of the tracks, but I was too broke to add the soundtracks, so if you get the time, seriously, scrounge around for the tracks. Like, they're that memorable. They're so good. Absolute bangers. Also, the artwork? I seldom understand what it means for something to have tasty artwork, but goddamn am I hungry for these designs. The badass dragons, the disturbing monstrosities, the fallen angels, the little fungi, holy shit! This game is beautiful at every turn, full of iconic and well-designed monsters that beams with just love and care. Also, I greatly appreciate as a new player to the series that they didn't immediately throw all 10 clans at me. It helped make the initial concept far more digestible. I'm also sure that returning players appreciate that the new factions were the ones that we started with instead of playing the old ones. That way we don't have to start with the old stuff right away. Especially with how long it took to get the old ones back. Overall, that decision was incredibly smart. Well done. Honestly, the fact this video is likely going to be my longest one on this channel probably shows just how much I love this game. However, despite the masterwork at play here, I did come away with a handful of negative points, so let's talk about it. Starting off, you might have noticed in the footage that there were particularly 2 reoccurring bosses in the background. This is because even though we have 3 different final bosses, the first and second major boss are always the exact same. While this didn't necessarily impact my enjoyment at all, it was certainly noticeable and felt odd. Typically, roguelikes have many different bosses possible in each area, but in this game there's consistently the big bird from Sesame Street and a literal child I've dropkicked every time. It felt really strange consistently seeing these 2. It makes me wonder if the first game was like this at all. I've never played the first game, as you know, so maybe it's always been like this, but I don't think some alternative first and second bosses would hurt. Speaking of bosses, let's talk the final boss, also known as the primary reason I've only ever beaten this game 3 times, not including the challenge run that was hardly a challenge. Someone must have kicked a dev's dog or something because this shit is fucking nuts. These final bosses are the only things that have consistently ended my runs, no matter how strong they are. Not only do these assholes have anywhere from 2.8 to the 3.8 thousand hit points, but they are given a wild side effect that is literally built around specifically making your shit worse or making enemies just overwhelming in general. I get the idea this is the final boss of the run, but this feels incredibly overtuned. One saps your units so they can't do as much melee damage, making big monster builds less effective. Another one gives corruption, which demolishes any unit that isn't self-sustaining, arguably making this boss counter damn near any build, that having the lowest health by the way, and corruption being a debuff that never removes itself or can't be removed. The last one gives all enemies in the rooms 3 stacks of rage. This is the only one I haven't beaten yet, and that's because it rarely shows up from my experience, and if it ever did, I sure as shit didn't beat it when I saw it. Point is, these bosses have wildly strong stats and side effects that unless you can crank out a 500 strength creature in a swift time period or your cards are buffed to where you're casting tons of shit for free, you likely won't even get to the relentless stage before getting wiped out. It's a criticism that I've been seeing somewhat frequently in the Steam reviews, and I kinda stand by it, only kinda because there's pretty clearly ways to beat them. It just means that anything that isn't the specific way is going to lose outright. So here's my suggestion, maybe consider instead of having these bastards being this strong early on, maybe nerf them during the early Covenant levels, then restore them or even buff them at later Covenant levels. That way new players such as my goofy ass can experiment with the factions a little bit more before getting our knees broken. I fully accept this being ultimately a skill issue, but I'd still argue anything designed with the explicit purpose of fuck your build in particular doesn't exactly sit well with me. Another thing I wanted to talk about is while information is certainly clearer here than it is in other games, I find it strange that you can't see how the numbers change for you after playing a card without playing the card. Does that make sense? Let me try to explain. All your monsters display their stats, even including incoming damage. However, if you hover over a monster with a buff card, the only way you know how the numbers change is by playing it instead of just hovering over it. Hopefully that explained it better. It's kind of gross, though it is something that is negated by another thing I have an issue with. The undo button is kind of stinky. Now, I get the idea of an aw shit button that allows you to undo the thing you just goofed up. The only problem is undoing in this game undoes everything that turn, not your most recent action. All of it. Why? Wouldn't it make more sense to log the actions taken that turn and then just undo that action? I'm sure the coding to restart a turn entirely is far easier than undoing an action, but if your turn comprised of like 8 plays, but the 9th play is the one that kills you, the game just says, "Ah, gee, that's too bad. Guess you'll have to time travel back to your birth so we can undo the mistake that was the last play you did." It's not enough to ruin the game. I still love the hell out of it, but the undo mechanic is so annoying that I'd rather just take the fucking hit sometimes. Other than these gripes though, that's all I have. So what do I think of the game? Monster Train 2 honestly took me by surprise by just how amazing it is. If the first game is even close to as good as this, I might even pick that one up as well. I'm ashamed that I've twiddled my thumbs on this for too long, and I wish I had more time to play it before I dropped this review. Unfortunately, the first week of my 2-week upload period was spent changing my model for the 4th time and playing World of Warcraft. Don't fucking judge me. Overall, I'd say this game is a 9 out of 10. Pretty damn good, but I think I noticed a distinct lack of extremely muscular women with a large hammer. Damn, this is an amazing tax write-off. This has been a Bottom Dweller. God, I love my job.